Hello everyone! I bet you thought I'd abandoned this project already, didn't you? Well, I regret to inform you that the development has been going better than ever. I actually wanted to make this devlog a few months ago, but I just kept working on new features and somehow it's the end of summer already. If you are new here, I'm making a medieval village/town building and management game, inspired by timeless titles like Dwarf Fortress, RimWorld, Stronghold, Caesar and so on, but also bringing a ton of novel and sometimes quirky mechanics, all made using a custom C++ game engine. In the previous devlog I've said that I will start working on Stockpiles soon and, well, yeah, that's exactly what I did. This required a huge ton of refactoring, primarily because my whole codebase assumed that each in-game tile can only be occupied by a single resource entity. After I finished this refactoring and fixed about 1,000 bugs introduced by it, I was finally able to actually stockpile resources. I made a flexible per resource type system that configures how exactly a pile of a particular resource should look like. I love how organized it looks now, really makes you believe that it's an actual human settlement or something. Next, I added a special stockpiling zone. Another button in the bottom tools panel now actually works instead of being a placeholder. As with other tools, I can draw an area on the ground and designate it to be a stockpile. By default, these stockpiles can store anything, but you can change that in the new stockpile settings menu. I'm thinking of adding something like stockpile priorities, but that can probably wait until I start working specifically on the logistics in the game. By the way, see that scroll bar UI component in the stockpile settings menu? I actually added it a bit earlier for a completely unrelated reason. You see, one thing I did after the last devlog was fix a ton of various bugs in the villagers' AI. This AI is really complex and debugging it is quite hard. To help with that, I added a special in-game AI events journal. I can use it to log various events happening in the AI side and see them in the new developer-only window. I can even filter out events by some substring, which is extra useful, for example, if I want to track what happened to a specific entity. Oh, and this input text UI component is also something I added specifically for this journal window, but it's obviously going to be useful in the future. And while I was working on this, I also added support for font fallbacks. Right now I'm using a certain medieval-looking font which only contains Latin script. In case it doesn't contain the required characters, I added the ability to switch to some simpler font that does have them. Now, since we've touched on UI, I've been doing numerous UI improvements as well. First, I added black outlines around various entity icons, which in my opinion makes them look 10 times better. And I added these icons in every place where they make sense, in workstation orders, in the build panel and so on. I also made a new progress bar component and replaced all percentages in my UI with this new component. For example, plant growth, tree cutting state, construction state and human needs are now displayed using this progress bar. Remember how in the last devlog I added the ability to dig the ground? Well, it only made sense to add the ability to fill it back. So that's exactly what I did with a new button in the tools panel. Nothing to talk about here really, except that I changed the sack carrying animation. I replaced the old goofy cloth simulation based animation with a simple suggestion from the comments to the previous video. Now villagers simply carry the sack on their back, which doesn't require any fancy procedural animation and also just looks better. By the way, if you like this project and want to support it, the best thing you can do is leave a like, subscribe to the channel and tell your friends about it. This will honestly help a lot. Thank you. Now the next big thing I worked on were roofs. Yep, you heard it right, after a year and a half of development, this game finally has proper roofs. It took me so long mostly because my game uses a triangular grid at its base, and roofs on such a grid are a bit weird. I need some scalable way of making the roof mesh out of a fixed set of tiles, so that I can easily add new roof types in the future. In my first prototypes I planned to have the roof tiles occupy the grid triangles, but I soon realized that it just doesn't really work. Triangles simply don't have enough connectivity data to accommodate all possible shapes, and the number of required tiles would be just unacceptable. In December last year I took another attempt at this, placing roof tiles on the grid vertices instead, which essentially makes them hexagonal. This worked much better, but it still required 55 different roof tiles to be made, which is still a bit too much. I was able to distill it to just 12 smaller tiles, but these tiles didn't work great either because they led to a ton of discontinuities in the resulting mesh normals and textures. Now, in July I decided that I can't postpone this any further, I had to settle on something. I played around with these meshes a bit more and decided that 55 tiles scheme is honestly the best I've got, so I rolled up my sleeves and just made them. It might sound daunting at first, but after you play with this geometry for so long, it turns out to be pretty straightforward, and I'd managed to finish all these tiles in just a couple hours. By the way, why are there exactly 55 tiles? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, each roof tile has 6 neighboring tiles, and each of the neighbors can either be at the same height, or it can be one step above or below. And of course, a neighbor can just have no roof at all. This, together with some other connectivity rules, leads to 334 possible tiles. However, these tiles are often simply rotations or mirror images of each other. Incorporating that as well, we are left with exactly 55 different roof tiles. Now that the tiles are done, I needed some UI for the player to actually shape the roof. In my older prototypes, I had a tool that detects the full outer boundary of a building and generates a roof shape based on this outline. I never really liked this tool, and I wanted to give more control to the player over how the roof is generated. So after some experimentation, I designed a new tool which allows you to manually draw an outline that will be used as a base for the roof. Then you can tweak the roof parameters in a special widget and finalize the roof, and the villagers will happily construct it. It adapts nicely to rather complicated shapes, and overall I'm really happy with how it turned out. Of course, now that we have roofs, we need to be able to see through them, otherwise it would be rather hard to create any interiors. I already had a feature to hide trees and walls, so I just had to add support for hiding roofs on appropriate heights as well. This feature even supports hiding stuff up to a specific floor, but I don't have multi-story buildings properly implemented yet, so unfortunately I can't demonstrate it. I also realized that together with the digging mechanic I can now build something like dugout houses. There is no way to put proper walls or doors on for them, but this can be an interesting option for really poor villagers or for stuff like cellars, so I'll keep this in mind in the future. The last big and important thing I worked on was the mood system for the villagers. Here I essentially took the same system from RimWorld. I think it works perfectly for me. Each villager has the current mood, which slowly drifts up or down based on various events or statuses affecting this villager, which you can inspect right here. For example, they get upset when they're hungry or very tired, when they had to sleep outside, or when they're just homeless. And they get happy when they ate something nice or felt comfortable, stuff like that. A lot of these effects are still not implemented, but the important thing is that the system itself is there. By the way, the mood itself doesn't affect anything yet as well. I'll be working on it at some point in the future. Apart from the big mechanics, I also worked on a ton of smaller things. I improved the collision avoidance for the villagers. I made them fall down from slopes with an appropriate animation. I added a tool to show non-navigable portions of the map. I added outlines around shadows for a nice visual effect. I sprinkled granite boulders around the map because I was bored. I finally added fence gates. I added a sawhorse workstation which is now used to craft planks. I redesigned plank fences, making them look differently on the inside and outside. By the way, please do write in the comments whether you like this change. I added support for shaking a tree to get some sticks without actually destroying the tree. I redesigned the X model to look more medieval and made metallic objects shine in the sun. And I added a bread resource together with a starting pack of 120 bread loaves to simplify testing the game. As you can see, there's been a huge ton of progress, but we are still far from the game being finished. For my next steps, I've planned some really awesome features that require a lot of planning, designing and solving technical problems, but these steps will finally bring the game much closer to how I envision it. By the way, if you don't want to wait for the next devlog to see these features, you can follow me on various social media where I make weekly or sometimes even daily posts about this game. The links will be in the video description. So that's it for today. If you want to support this game, you know what to do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.